Okay, so we're going to factor trinomials where the leading coefficient again is not 1. But in the previous two lessons, the GCF, when you go back, the GCF was 1. So in this lesson, the GCF is not 1. So remember, the GCF is not 1. You got to have to factor out the GCF first before factoring the trinomial that's left. Okay, so for example, let's go ahead and factor. Let's suppose we had 12x cubed plus 11x squared plus 2x. So 12x cubed plus 11x squared plus 2x. So the GCF, if you look at all these three terms, the GCF is going to be x. There's an x in every term. Remember, use the 1 with the smallest exponent. So the GCF here is just x. So I'm going to rewrite this polynomial. First thing you do is factor out the x. So you're going to rewrite the polynomial as 12 times, and remember, x times 12x squared is 12x cubed. When you multiply like bases, you add exponents. Plus 11x, because x times 11x is 11x squared. When you multiply like bases, x times x, 1 plus 1 is 2. And then plus 2. X times 2 is 2x. Okay, so then I'm going to get x times and then two binomials. Okay, now it could turn out that this trinomial cannot be factored, in which case that will be the answer. All right, but let's just go ahead right now and let's assume that I can factor this, so I can put those two binomials here. So let's go off to the side and kind of figure out what this is, because I'm going to do the work here. So 12x squared plus 11x plus 2. All right, so let's see what's going to work. All right, so there are several possibilities for 12x squared. There's remember, it's 12x squared. So there's 4x times 3x. There is 6x times 2x. There's 12x times 1x. That's about it. All right, so let's try for right now. Let's try the 4x and the 3x and see if that's going to help us. The 4x and the 3x. So 4 and 3 are close together in the number line, then 6 and 2 are, then 12 and 1 are. All right, so we're going to put 4x here, 3x here, and again, it does not matter. Does not matter where you put the 4x or where you put the 3x. Okay, so again, using the idea of FOIL, so that takes care of the f. So 4x times 3x is 12x squared. So far I'm good. Now let's go to the last. 2 is prime. So there's only one possibility for 2, and that's 2 times 1. Now, remember though, the last sign's positive. The last sign's positive. So that means that these signs in here can be the same, either both negative or they're both positive, because a positive times a positive is a positive, a negative times a negative is still a positive. But I need the middle sign to be positive. In order for that to happen, in order for me to add the outer and the inner to be positive 11, both of these have to be plus symbols, the plus signs. All right, now remember 2 and 1, right? So am I going to put the 2 here? Think about our previous lesson. You know you're not going to put the 2 here. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. You know you're going to put the 2 here because that means that 4x plus 2, I can take out a 2. So I'm not writing it, but I'm kind of indicating here with the pen strokes. So I can take out a 2. So you know the 2 is not going to go here. So let's put the 2 here and the 1 there and see what happens. All right, so be strategic. Think about this. So I get the outer is 8x. The inner is 3x. Positive 8x and a positive 3x. I'm going to add them up. I do get 11x. So there's your answer. So the answer is going to, now be careful. In the blank, don't say that that is your answer, because all you've done was factor this. This right here is the factorization for this. But remember, that was not the original polynomial. The original polynomial was this. So remember, the GCF was x, so your answer has to include the GCF. So GCF is x. You can say x times, and then these two binomials. So 4x plus 1 times 3x plus 2. All right, now always check yourself, though. 4x times 3x is 12x squared. 1 times positive 1 times a positive 2 is a positive 2, and when I do the outer end, I get 11x. All right, and if I multiply this right here by x, I will get this back. All right, so there's your answer. All right, so that's number 1. Okay, let's look at this one, number 2. So notice all the work you had to do, or you had to think about in order to get this done. Okay, number 2. Suppose you had, suppose we had this. We had 21b squared minus 48b minus 45. So 21b squared minus 48b minus 45. Okay, so in this case, the GCF is going to be 3. So the GCF here is 3. No variable because this term has b's, this term has b, but this one doesn't. So you're not going to pull out any b's. But the GCF is 3 because the larger factor that goes into 21, 48, and 45 is 3. All right, so I'm going to pull out a 3. I'm going to factor out a 3. And I'm going to get 3 times 7b squared. So 3 times 7b squared is 21b squared. Minus, that's going to be, let's see, 16. Always check yourself. Use your calculator if you got to. 48 divided by 3 is 16. But that's going to be 16b. And then right here, 45 divided by 3 is 15. So I get minus 15. All right. So, again, it could be that 7b squared minus 16b minus 15 cannot be factored, in which case that would be your answer. But let's go ahead and see if it can be factored. So I'm going to go ahead and just write this as 2 binomials. And let's put this down here and let's work it out. Let's do all the work here just like we did this one. So I get 7b squared minus 16b minus 15. Okay, minus 15. All right, 2 binomials. So FOIL. All right, 7b squared is going to be easy because 7's prime. So the only possibilities for 7b squared are 7b and b. And again, it doesn't matter whether you put b here or 7b there. It does not matter. All right, so 7b squared was not an issue. Now let's look at, now the last term is negative 15, but let's just look at 15. Let's think about 15. Now remember, the last sign's negative, so remember that means one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. All right, and the outer and the inner, when you look at the outer and inner, the larger, well, first of all, the outer and inner have to add up to be negative 16. So that means that the larger of these, whatever these terms are, the larger of these would have to be negative. The larger coefficient, the larger absolute value would have to be negative. Okay, let's look at 15. The possibility of 15 is 5 times 3, 15 times 1. All right, now keep in mind that the constant is negative 15, but I'm just looking at the absolute value of it for right now. All right, so there's 2 possibilities, 5 and 3, 15 and 1. All right, so let's try the 5 and 3 first since it's closer together number line, and we'll try 15 and 1 if that doesn't work. Let's put the 5 here. Well, let's put the 5 here and the 1 there. Okay. Now I put the 5 here and the 1 there for a reason, just to show you it's not going to work. But many of you, I think at this point, many of you would have realized, hey, I can't put the 5 here because that's a 35b, and this is negative 16. So, yeah, you're on the right track if you thought that way. But let me just show you. So that's 35b, and that is 1b, right? So the larger coefficient right here will take this middle sign. So that means that this is negative and this has to be positive. And when I add them up, obviously you know that it wouldn't work because that's a negative 34b. All right, so I'm going to cross it out. Then what I'm going to do now is switch the 5 and the 1. So I'm going to say, I'm going to rewrite this over. So I'm going to say this will be 5 and this will be 1. Right here. Right here. So 5 and 1. So the outer this time is 7b. Without the signs, I'm not putting the signs in yet. The inner is 5b. Now let's talk about the signs. The last sign's negative. So that means that these signs in here will be different. All right, and the larger coefficient, which is 7 here, takes this middle sign. So this has to be negative. This has to be positive. Okay? And so, oops, I'm sorry. I said 15 and 1. I messed that up, didn't I? That should have been a 3 right here. Let me go back and fix it. 3 right here. So that's 35b, and that's a 3b. And again, it still doesn't work because that's going to be what, 32? I'm not sure why I said 15 and 1, and this is going to be a 3 because I'm using 15 and 3. So that's going to be 20, negative 21b, and that is 5b. And notice when I add them up, I do get a negative 16b. So that works. All right. So all I got to do now is just fix the signs. So that's so in order for the outer to be negative 21b, that means that 3 has to be negative, and in order for 5b to be positive, that means that 5 has to be positive. Before we go on, before I put the answer here, don't forget the GCF is 3, so that has to be part of your answer. Let's check this using FOIL. 7b times b is 7b squared, so that takes care of the up. A positive 5 times a negative 3 is a negative 15, so that takes care of the L right here. Now the out and the in I've already done, so I'm going to put the signs in the correct spots. 7b times negative 3 is negative 21b. Positive 5 times b is a positive 5b. I'm going to add them up. I get a negative 16b, and that's what I wanted. But again, don't forget, it's easy to make a mistake. You're not factoring this. The original problem was not this. The original problem was this, where the GCF was 3. So you got to have 3 in your answer. So I'm going to have 3 times, and then these two binomials. So it'll be 7b plus 5 times b minus 3. So there's your answer. All right, so that's number 2. All right, number 3. Suppose we had, let's see. Okay, suppose we had 6x squared y squared minus 2x y squared minus 60 y squared. So 6x squared y squared minus 2x y squared minus 60 y squared. All right, so the GCF here, 6, negative 2, and negative 60. The GCF is going to be 2 so far. All right, now look at your variables. I don't have x in every term, so I'm not going to have an x in the GCF. But look at your y's. I have y's in every term. And 2, 2, and 2, remember you always use the smaller. The smaller of 2, 2, and 2 is 2. So I'm going to take out 2y squared. So there's my GCF. So I'm going to factor out the GCF of 2y squared. And then I'm going to rewrite this so that way when I distribute, I get this back. So remember, you have 3 terms here. You better have 3 terms inside your parentheses. 2y squared times 3x squared, 2y squared times 3x squared is going to be 6x squared y squared. 2 times 3 is 6. X squared times y squared is x squared y squared. Minus 2y squared times 2xy squared is just x. So 2y squared times a negative x is a negative 2xy squared. Minus 2y squared times what is 60y squared? Well, that is 30. Because 2 times a negative 30 is a negative 60, and then you have your y squared. All right, so far I have this. Now, remember, if this trinomial is not factoring further, then this is your answer. That would be your answer. But let's see if I can factor this further. All right, so I'm going to bring this to the side. I'm going to work on this right here. 3x squared minus x minus 30. So let's work on that. So use the idea of FOIL. All right. Now, you see this 3x squared? That's a nice number. 3 is prime, so the only possibilities would be 3x and x. All right, so 3x times x is 3x squared, so that takes care of the f. Now remember, the last sign's negative. Last sign's negative, so that means I'm going to have a plus and a minus. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. This could be the positive, or this could be the negative. This could be a positive, or this could be the negative. But the signs in here have to be different. But this is a 30, and I know the last term is negative 30, but look at the absolute value of it. So let's just think about 30 for right now, and then we'll worry about the negative when we talk about the signs. There are several possibilities for 30. There's 6 times 5. There is 10 times 3. There is 15 times 2. And there is 30 times 1. So 6 times 5 is 30. 10 times 3 is 30. 15 times 2 is 30. 30 times 1 is 30. And again, you just like before, you want to try the numbers close together in the number line. If that doesn't work, you'll try something else. All right, okay, so I'm going to try 6 and a 5. Now you know that 6 will not go here because 3x and whatever sign is 6, that means you could take out a 3. All right, so don't waste your time. So put the 6 here and the 5 here. All right, now let's look at the outer and the inner for right now. The outer is 18x. The inner is 5x. And remember, the larger of these coefficients takes out the middle sign, so that means 18x is going to be the negative one. When I add them up, though, a positive 5 and negative 18, that gives me a negative 13, so x. So that doesn't work. All right, that does not work. So let's try something else. I'm going to go off right here, rewrite it. So 3x, remember I had 3x and x. All right. So you may say, well, let's switch to 6 and a 5. Well, you don't want to do that either because we just talked about that. If you put the 6 here, don't forget, remember we just talked about it. The 6 here, that means I can take out a 3. You can take out a 3, which means that this original polynomial here, this right here, I can factor out a 3, and I can't. All right, so remember the previous lesson. I cannot do that. So then that means that maybe I don't want to use the 6 and the 5. Maybe I need to use the 10 and the 3. All right, let's try the 10 and the 3. Now you know that 3 won't go here for the same reason we just discussed. If 3 goes here, I'm going to go ahead and put it, and let's put a plus sign here. That means you could factor out a 3. You'd have 3 times x plus 1, which means, and we talked about this in a previous lesson, which means that the GCF here, for this right here, was 3, and it's not. This GCF right here is 1. This GCF right here is 1. So that can't work. All right, so be strategic. Think about all of this. All right, so you know that the 10 and the 3, that 10 has to go here and 3 has to go here. All right, now let's check it just like we did here. The outer is 6x. 9x. The outer is 9x. The inner is 10x. Remember, the last sign's negative, so it means that these signs in here have to be different. So 10x has to be this middle sign. So 10x has to be negative, the 9x has to be positive, and before we go on filling these signs in here, let's check. A negative 10x and a positive 9x is a negative 1x, and that is what you wanted. So the terms, the order in which I see them is correct. All I've got to do now is put in these signs. So in order to get a negative 10x here, that means this 10 has to be negative. And in order to get a positive 9x here, that means that 3 has to be positive. All right, and check yourself before you put the answer. Remember, the GCF of the original, this was what you wanted to factor originally. You got to have this GCF in your answer. But let's check this right here to make sure I get this. 3x times x is 3x squared. A negative 10 times a positive 3 is a negative 30. And the outer is positive 9x. The inner, negative 10 times x, is a negative 10x. And when I add them up, I do get a negative x. And that is what I wanted right here. So now my answer is going to be 2y squared times these two binomials. So 3x minus 10 times x plus 3. And again, it did not matter if you said 2y squared times x plus 3 times 3x minus 10. Did not matter. All right, so that was number 3. All right, now let's look at one or two more. Let's look at number 4. All right, suppose we had this. Suppose we had 4x cubed minus 9x squared minus 9x. So 4x cubed minus 9x squared minus 9x. Alright, suppose I had that. Okay, so the GCF here, GCF is x, right? GCF is x. So I'm going to factor out an x. I get x times 4x squared. So x times 4x squared is 4x cubed minus 9x. X times a negative 9x is a negative 9x squared. And then minus 9. All right. Now, if I cannot factor 4x squared minus 9x minus 9, then this right here would be your answer. Because the GCF is x, you take it out. Don't say prime, because I can still factor this. I just took out an x. But let's just go see if I can factor this further. So I'm going to say x times. Let's see if I can do this as two binomials. Go off to the side and rewrite this. 4x squared minus 9x minus 9. Again, we're using FOIL and trial and error. If something doesn't work, cross it out, try something else. Okay, so the first, I have a 4x squared here. So let's try 2x and 2x for that one. The only possibilities of 4x squared, if you think about it, is 4x and x, and then 2x and 2x. Again, but let's just try the numbers that are close together in the number line, so 2 and 2. For 9, now I know this is a negative 9, but let's look at the absolute value. For 9, I just get 9 times 1, 3 times 3. We're going to try 3 and 3 first. All right, see if that works. But remember, the last sign is negative, so it means that these signs have to be different. All right, so let's put minus 3. Oops, let me put the signs last. Let's put 3 and 3. All right, 3 and 3. All right, now I want you to think about this. The outer is 6x. The inner is 6x. And remember, notice they're the same. All right, they're the same. So again, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So in the previous problem, in the several problems, the larger of these takes this middle sign. Well, they're both the same, so it does not matter. It does not matter which one you make negative. So this is negative, this is positive, but I want you to notice something. You get 0x, but that's not what you wanted. You wanted negative 9x, so this is not correct. That's not correct. So instead of using 2x and 2x, because if I switch to 3 and 3, it's not going to matter because it's the same numbers. So instead of using 2x and 2x, let's use 4x and x. I'm going to not use that any further. So let's use 4x and x. I'm still going to keep 3 and 3, so let's see what happens. So let's put 3 here, and hopefully we'll get something that's going to work. But remember, the last sign's negative, so that means that one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Either this operation will be a plus, or this can be a subtraction. So let's check the outer first. So the outer is 12x, the inner is 3x, and the larger of these coefficients will be this middle sign. So that means that 12x is negative. Before I go ahead and fill in these signs right here, let's check. A positive 3 and a negative 12 is a negative 9. So a positive 3x and a negative 12x is a negative 9x, and that is what you wanted. So now I'm almost done. These terms are in the correct order. So all I got to do is figure out which one's positive, which one's negative. The outer, remember, 4x times 3, I want this to be a negative 12x. In order for that to happen, this 3 has to be negative. And I want this to be a positive 3x. In order for that to happen, this 3 here has to be a positive 3. Before I put these factors here, let's check. 4x times x is 4x squared. So the F is okay. A positive 3 times a negative 3 is a negative 9. So L is okay. And now for the outer and the inner, the outer, 4x times a negative 3 is a negative 12x. A positive 3 times x is a positive 3x. I'm going to add them up. 3 and a negative 12. I get a negative 9. So there's your answer. But don't forget, you got to have the GCF in your answer. So it's x times 4x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay? All right. So that's going to take care of this lesson.